Today is Monday, April 21st, 2009. I'm Jacqueline White of the Fannin County Historical Commission, and today I'm interviewing the former Miss Virginia Peeler. Virginia?
I'm Virginia Peeler Cothran. I was born in Bonham. I was a product of older parents. My father was Ray Peeler Sr. He was 52 when I was born. My mother was Opal Porter Peeler, and she was 39 when I was born. And my brother Ray Peeler Jr. was 7 years older than I was. And my mother often used to say that it was as though she had two separate families since my brother was so much older than I was. And I went to Duncan School for elementary. I did not go to the free kindergarten, which was in South Bonham and which had been run by Miss Catherine Phillips. And I was started to school young. I was only 5 years old when I went to the first grade, and my birthday was in October, but I did start out at 5. And I went all the way through Duncan School. Those were the years when the Duncan School went from first grade through 8th grade, and then I graduated from high school early because if you went to summer school for 2 summers, you could make it with enough credits, and so I got out early. I should have been in the class of 1954, but instead I graduated with the class of 1953. I do want to mention this before I forget it. My aunt was Kitty Bell Peeler Henderson. She lived on West 5th Street as we did. Our address was 412 West 5th Street, and I believe her address might have been 309 West 5th Street. Both houses are still standing. And my aunt was my father's sister, and she was a wonderful character. I just adored her. And she once told me that in the early days of Bonham, there was a canal that ran between where Betty Campbell lives on West 5th Street and the old Alexander house. I believe it later became the Klein house, but I'm not positive of that. But anyway, this canal ran there. And if you happen to go by that area of town, you will see that there is a low place between those houses. And she said that they even ice skated on it way back there. And that they decided that it was a hazard as far as maybe children getting into it and drowning. So they decided to put earth into it and try to cover it over, which is what they did. But I've often thought that if anyone was ever inclined to try to dig up artifacts from that era, that would be a real good hunting ground. And by virtue of the fact that I was much younger and my relatives were all older, I absorbed a lot just from hearing them talk, and I always loved to hear them talk. And so this is one thing about my aunt. As I say, her name was Kitty Bell, and she had been, was quite musical, and she attended the New York Conservatory of Music, which I believe was the forerunner of Juilliard. I'm not positive about that, but that's always been my impression. She also made her debut at the Idlewild Ball, and she was just lovely and so dear to me. Her husband's name was Murray Maxey Henderson, and he was from Sulphur Springs. And they lived all over the country, mainly in the Chicago area, because he was a furniture salesman and traveled in his work. And so anyway, he died early, I believe, in the 1940s. It possibly is in one of the Bonham books. I'm sure it is, and he is buried at Willow Isle Cemetery. But my aunt was just, as I say, a lovely, and she was considered very, very pretty. And her parents, her mother was Mary Doss Peeler, and I still have the newspaper about her death, and I believe that I have given some of that information to the Fannin County Museum of History. But if you don't have it, I will be happy to make other copies for you. But one of the very worst weather conditions was soon after Christmas, right before the turn of the century, meaning the night of before the 1900s. And Mrs. Peeler died during this flu season, and she died young. I think she was only in her 40s, perhaps, when she died. And her full name was Mary Alexander Doss Peeler, and she was married to John Washington Peeler, and he's the one that started the Peeler drugstore. And so there was another son as well named Reb Peeler, and he had a drugstore on the north side of the square. And he was the oldest. Then my aunt, and we called her Beba, although her name was Kitty Bell. And then the third child was my father, Ray. And they all lived in Bonham in their later years, and my aunt lived in the Peeler home place, which was 309 West 5th Street. But in later years, she decided to sell that house and have a house built on the lot behind that house, which would have made it on West 6th Street, and that house is still standing. And now the house that Brian Peeler and his wife Cheryl live in was patterned after this very house. So anyway, I grew up and, as I say, graduated in 1953 from high school. And it's always been my pleasure that I was a graduate of Bonham High School, because I love to attend the reunions. And so I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to go to those. I don't know that I can say too much else about myself. I am married to Alex Cothran, C-O-T as in Tom, H-R-A-N, and we live in Fort Worth, and we have two daughters, Adair, A-D-A-I-R, and Leah. And now back to Bonham. I really don't know that I can tell you too much else. I would like to talk about Irwin Smith a little bit.
Okay.
Irwin Smith's half-sister was Mary Alice White Pettis, and she was a really good friend of my mother's. And Mrs. Pettis went to Pine Manor in Massachusetts, I believe it is, which was a finishing school, and then went on to Wellesley. And she then became the head decorator at Woodward and Lothrop department store in Washington, D.C. But her husband was the judge for the Interstate Commerce Commission in Washington, and he was from Oxford, Mississippi, originally. And they would come to Bonham to check on their farms, or her farms, in the summertime. And so then Miss Mary Alice decided that as they got on in years and they were close to retirement ages, that they would build a house in Bonham. And they were very interested in building where Fama Acres is now, and that was on East 9th Street. I think the Bales, or maybe Emily Porter lived there at one time. I'm not real sure about this. But anyway, Miss Mary Alice was very concerned with germs and anything to do with insecticides. And they were, I think, had already even gotten the lot for this house. And the fumigating trucks or something went by one night, and she learned that they did this quite often in the summer to cut down on mosquitoes. And so she right then said, no, we are not going to buy or build a house in Bonham. We are going to go out into the country where those trucks don't come. So that is the reason that they constructed their house, which was, I think, somewhere near Boyd, Texas.
Okay.
And so that's a little aside there. And I will say that the Amon Carter Museum has most all of Irwin Smith's glass.
I've been there.
Have you? Yes. And
Yeah.
so this is a wonderful tie, I think, with Bonham. And Nancy Strickland is the person that is doing so much with the Irwin Smith papers. And especially she's worked out a program where through modern technology, these programs can be sent to various public schools, and then they can have maybe a session or two on Irwin Smith. And I had thought this would be wonderful for the bottom schools, but evidently they didn't quite feel like they had the facilities to be able to take this. And so if they should ever change their minds, it's Nancy Strickland at the Amon Carter Museum that could help. And I'll try to talk about some of the characters that used to be in Bonham. Maybe that would be helpful.
That would be interesting for us.
At one time, there was a fellow that really wasn't quite with it, who roamed the streets, and his name was Whit Dunn, Whittitt, I believe, or maybe it was Witt Dunn. And Bonham had such interesting characters that were part of my memories. Another person that was interesting was Mrs. Harkins, I believe her last name was, who lived right next door to right by the Presbyterian Church, the First Presbyterian Church. And she had been involved in a fire at some time in her life, and bless her heart, she was disfigured. And she always wore these glasses that one was dark and one was a lighter color, and her nose was very disfigured. And so as a child, you really felt like you were she was almost haunting like, because when you would see her at the door, it was such a sad sight to see her. And then another person that was highly revered in Bonham was a Brother Milam, who had been the minister, I believe, at the First Baptist Church. And he was an interesting man and always revered in Bonham. And of course, there were music teachers in Bonham. There was Miss Margaret Tobin and Miss Virginia Baird and Mrs. Belle Baird Gober. And they all taught piano. And Miss Virginia Baird's home was on Main Street.
It is. It's on Main. Yeah.
And I believe they're trying to turn it into a bed and breakfast, or maybe they've already succeeded.
That I don't know. I know they're restoring it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she and Mrs. Belle Baird Gober were sisters. And Mrs. Gober was my teacher for a while after Mrs. Margaret Tobin had moved to Dallas. And then I also had Mrs. Burl McClure as a piano teacher. And I was very, very fond of Mrs. McClure. There were lots of McClures in Bonham at one time, and Mr. Earl McClure was a drug salesman, and his wife's name was Edith. And Mr. Earl McClure had been in my father's wedding, I believe, or maybe not my father's wedding, but my father was in his wedding.
Uh-huh.
And so then it turned out when we moved to Fort Worth that their one and only child, Nancy, became my good friend. And she had married David Alexander, and he lives in Fort Worth. He is in his 90s, and he is the son of Mr. Rube Alexander, who lived on Cedar Street in the house, or near the house where all the cats, I think there was all this that happened with the animals in the house a year or so ago. And I enjoyed going to Bonham State Park. This was where, when you went there as a young person, that's where you learned to swim. And then Lake Fannin was the site of many of the campfire camps. And I thoroughly enjoyed going there, and also Leonard, the girls from Leonard that were in the Campfire Girls would be with the Bonham group. I've met several of the girls from Leonard that way. And I really enjoyed living on West 5th Street because there were sidewalks, and it was just great to get to be on sidewalks and ride your tricycle or your bicycle up and down on those sidewalks. And Dr. A.B. Kennedy was the doctor who brought me into the world. And he lived on the corner of West 5th Street and I believe Star Street. I'm not positive of that, but it was his family that established the Allen Memorial Hospital. I believe that David Alexander has told me that his relative was a Mr. Alexander that was very, very prominent in early days of Bonham, and that his widow, I believe, married this Mr. Allen. I believe he was in some kind of military unit or something, and he had a title like general or something like that.
Captain. I think it was captain.
Captain,
yeah.
okay. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, that is the basis of Allen Memorial Hospital. And Miss Madeline Arledge was a great friend of my mother's and also of mine. And her maiden name was Jones, and it was her brother, Charlie Jones, who helped found Richfield Oil Company, which is now part of British Petroleum, is it not? Arco, and then I think British Petroleum.
Maybe.
But anyway, he was very, very prominent in California. And Mr. John Arledge and Miss Madeline's one and only child was named Charles Arledge. And he went to college in California and then was very high up, I think, with Chevron. And so you see, he would have been the nephew of this Charlie Jones. Oh yes, Mr. Charlie Jones gave the money for Jones Field. That's right. Mm-hmm. And the airfield. And I don't...
Your mother started
the Bonham Library, helped found or gave something with the Bonham Public Library, I believe.
Who was that?
This was my mother.
Oh, your mother.
Yes.
Was instrumental in...
And also the little theater. She was very, very strong in that. And I've given some information of like that to Tom Scott, and it should be in some of their records. Yeah. And my mother was also in the current literature club, and I did run down some of their yearbooks, and I think I've given those to Tom, and they should be there. And then...
Wasn't it something Players?
There.
I don't know. I can't remember what the name of it was. I am continuing to go through my mother's things. She never threw much away, and
well, that's
I
good, though, for historical reasons.
Yes, so I keep saying each summer, well, now this summer I'm going to finish going through all of these things. So this will give me impetus to keep going for more.
Well, did she say any of the programs or anything from the little theater?
Yes, and yes,
some of that stuff
yes,
that would be interesting.
Yes.
We might be able to make up a display here if you found enough items.
Okay.
Of hers and some pictures of her possibly. Or,
well, I don't know. I have an idea she worked behind the scenes, that this was more what she did.
That's fine, though. I mean, it doesn't just have to be on the little...
Yes. She was highly educated. She graduated from the University of Texas and then went on and got her master's at Rice. And then she taught she was from Tyler originally, and she was one of 4 girls. And her father was president of Mayfield Wholesale Grocery Company there. And so anyway, she then came to Bonham as a young bride, or not as a young bride, as a young school teacher, and she taught under L.H. Rather, who I believe was the principal or superintendent one. Yeah. And she was very, very fond of him. And my father, as I say, was 13 years older than she was. But he had had a very sad life in that his mother had died young when he was only 13. And whereas his brother and sister had been able to go to college, his brother had gone to Virginia or Stanton Military Academy in Virginia. My father went to a business school for about 6 months, I think, and then learned the pharmacy trade as well. And so then he came in and worked in the drugstore from then on.
Oh.
And so anyway, he really had a very sad life because he just worked all the time.
Yeah.
And those days, there was no such thing as your closing on time. I mean, there was always, it seemed like, the drugstore was open maybe until 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Midnight.
Well, it was midnight. Well, his father was a pharmacist as well. And then so often we would get these phone calls in the middle of the night. My baby is sick, or I'm not well and I've got to have medicine. And my daddy would get up and go open up the drugstore and fill the prescription. And so many prescriptions were never, or bills were never paid. And at his death, my mother just had worlds of unpaid bills on the books that had to be forgiven because people wouldn't pay them.
Yeah. Oh.
But anyway, and we had a family that lived next door to us named Mrs. Carrie Murphy, and she had a son, Dick, who had been stayed at home all the time. I understand it when he was young and before he had been a very fine young man, and was a member of the Masons. But he was afflicted, and whenever he would sit on the porch. They had a very nice porch that he would sit on most of the time. And if you should happen to wander over there, he would try to encounter you to show you his Masonic ring. He was very, very proud of his Masonic ring. It was, see my ring, see my ring. And so Mrs. Murphy was an invalid. Mr. Murphy had died, and she then took in her sister, Miss Sudie Newsom, and she was, all of them needed lots of medicine. And I will never forget that one time my mother had broken her leg, and we had all moved downstairs to be with her, to stay with her at night. And so my daddy and I were asleep in this very small bed next to the main bedroom where my mother was. And it was storming one night, and the lightning was flashing, and it was really, really a miserable night. And we woke up and heard this noise that kept saying, "Mr. Ray, Mr. Ray." And it was Miss Sudie, who was on the porch with this lightning flashing, and as you looked up, you saw this face just right across from you, and it was Miss Sudie. "I've got to have medicine, Mr. Ray. I've got to have medicine." So he had to get up and go get medicine for her. So anyway, and then I had these 3 little cousins that lived across the street from us, where the Gopforths live now. All their husbands had died young. The oldest one was Mrs. Ella Crawford, and her husband had started the Graham Crawford department store here in Bonham, and he was another one that died young. And so when all the 3 sisters had lost their husbands, they decided to all live together in this house across the street from us. And so they were like little grandmothers to me, although the first one, Mrs. Crawford, died when I was rather young. But then when I was, I guess maybe 3 or 4 years old, the next one, who was married to Mr. J.W. Hayden, and I believe their house, Mr. Hayden's house in Ladonia, is still standing. And I read not too long ago that it was on the tour of homes, and Mr. Hayden, I think, was a banker and very prominent in banking circles, but had been married before. But I have the letter that he wrote to, I guess it would have been Mrs. Oliphant, because Mrs. Oliphant was, the 3 little sisters were all the Oliphant sisters before they married. And so after Mrs. Crawford, there was Mrs. Nan Hayden, or Mrs. Annie Hayden, and then the 3rd one was Mrs. Frances Whitworth. And so anyway,
how'd they get the names?
well, supposedly when my brother Ray was little, he couldn't say, the first one's name was Ella, and he got Otta out of it. And then with Miss Annie, he got the name Nan. And then with the 3rd one, her name was Frances, but supposedly when she was a baby, a man had come to visit in their home, and they had let him hold her, and she kind of wrapped herself around his neck, and he said, "My word, this is just like a little coon wrapping herself around your neck." And so from then on, she was known as Cooney. So Ray threw all the names together and called them Ottanan and Coon. So, anyway, they were
Cute.
precious ladies, and they helped raise me as well. I mean,
And that's where that party.
oh, this famous party that where they would
Fourth of
yeah, a 4th of July or around that time, where they would reenact
all
colonial
dressed-
ladies and
dressed
have on
up
their
in
these
fancy.
costumes that these
No, I
colonial
hadn't
ladies.
heard about it. Yeah.
Well, I think again Tom has a picture of that, and if not, I believe there's a picture of it in the Brookshire store.
Oh, okay.
And
And it was a 4th of July party?
I think so, or maybe it was
Maybe
Washington's
Washington's birthday,
birthday.
something.
Perhaps it was like that. But it's I can spot
Is
my
that-
relatives.
Is
It's
that the one where they're all around the courthouse and it's just jammed full of people?
well, it's not
No,
the
it's all in the
courthouse.
house.
It's this house where the Gopforths live now,
Oh,
on that
okay,
porch. It's
the
on that porch. Yes.
I have seen that picture.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about.
Well,
Yeah.
they evidently in that time loved to, have these dress ups and
I can't imagine with the air conditioning what it must have been like.
but it may have been Washington's birthday. I think
might have been.
it was possibly that rather than the 4th of July. But anyway, those were my 3 cousins. Well, they were really my father's cousins, but
Oh.
it was lots of fun to go visit them, and especially sometimes I get to spend Friday night with them, and it was just
That'd be fun for a child.
right,
wouldn't it? Yeah.
right. I loved
Well,
it.
you said, where did you say you went to college? To Stevens?
I went to Stevens College in Columbia, Missouri for a year, and I was
Okay.
a piano major or a music major.
Music major.
And then I transferred from there to SMU and got my degree at SMU in public school music or music education.
Uh-huh.
And so then I went to Fort Stockton, Texas, and taught for 2 years in an all Hispanic school. I loved the Hispanic children, and had practiced taught in a Hispanic school in Dallas, Ben Milam. And so then, after having taught in Fort Stockton for a couple of years, I moved to Dallas and requested that I be in another Hispanic school, and they put me in West Dallas. West Dallas is not a very prosperous area,
Okay.
and so way back, I think in the 1950s, there was a tornado that went through Singleton Boulevard, and when I was practice teaching in Dallas, one of our requirements was that you had to teach a course or teach a segment of your own choosing, but go all the way through that segment. And so I chose ballads and folk song. And in that time, you could go to the Dallas Public Schools library and get information about ballads and folk songs. And so they had quite a selection of folk songs that the Lomax family, the father, Alan Lomax, and his father, or rather vice versa, the father and son, had gone into the Appalachian Mountains and recorded all of these
Okay.
folk songs. And then, as I say, there were ballads as well. And so I had checked out the records and had brought them to my school to then get ready to use them in my teaching. And so one of the days that I was not at the school, the lead teacher I was working under decided that she would get into these records and that she would play some of them for the students. And so the next day when I came, I knew there was some kind of commotion going on about the records, but I was involved with my teaching and I didn't pay that much attention to all of this. And so when the class was over, my lead teacher said, "Do you know what all that was about?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And she said, "Well, I played some of these ballads and folk songs for these kids, and among them was a ballad called The Ballad of Bonnie and Clyde." And
Shocking.
I said, "Well, who are Bonnie and Clyde?" And she said, You mean you've never heard of Bonnie and Clyde? Well, see, this was 1956 or 57, and they hadn't come into prominence, and they were killed, I think, in 1933.
Yeah.
And this was before I was born, and so
Right.
I'd never heard of them.
Yeah.
And so she said, well, Bonnie and Clyde were raised in West Dallas, and one of the girls in the school, well, this turned out later that one of the girls in the school that I taught in West Dallas was named Bonnie Parker, and the real Bonnie Parker was her aunt. And so anyway, the upshot was that one of the students, one of the 4th or 5th grade children, went home and told his parents about the teacher had played this ballad of Bonnie and Clyde. And the grandfather said, well, I have all these police pictures of Bonnie and Clyde when they were killed because I was in on their capture. And so the child had brought all the police pictures to the school to show to his fellow classmates. But he showed them to the lead teacher first, and she saw what they were and stuffed them back in an envelope and said, take these home and don't show them to anyone. So anyway, that was my experience with Bonnie and Clyde.
Well, that's interesting.
So now I don't know that I can tell too much else.
When you met your husband, were you teaching yet?
Well, I was in my senior year at SMU, and I was preparing for a senior recital on the piano.
Okay.
And Beth Smith, who grew up in Bonham and had gone to TCU with Alex, my husband, called me and said that Alex had already graduated from TCU and was in the Army and would like to meet someone. Did she know anyone that might be eligible? And so we did go out, and this was my senior year, and he was stationed in Albuquerque, and he never called me back. So I graduated from SMU. I went to Fort Stockton and taught for a couple of years, and I was teaching in Dallas, but living in Irving. And so Beth calls me again and said, well, I've heard from Alex Cothran again, and he says that he would like for you to try to set him up with someone. And I've told him that I only know 3 girls. One is 6 feet tall, the other one is engaged, and then there's Virginia, and you had a date with her and you never called her back. And so he said, well, just get me a date with her.
I don't think that's it.
But anyway, so she called me and I said, oh, Beth, he never called me back, and that was 2 years ago. I just don't believe that, this is going to be very helpful to either one of us, and I don't believe I want to do this. So she said, well, okay. So then she called me back sometime later and said, well, Alex says he really would like to be with you again, and after all, he was in the Army, and he didn't have that much time. It was just a short time that he was on leave, and so would you please, as a favor of me, to go on and go out with him? And so I will cook a meal for us, and then you can be around Kent, my husband, and me, and then if you don't feel like that you're hitting it off, well, then it'll be an easier time of it.
Yeah.
So we did hit it off well this
That was
time,
good.
and so now we're together. And we have 2 daughters, and my oldest daughter is Adair, and she is married to an American Airlines pilot, and they live in Fort Worth, and they have our 2 grandchildren, a girl and a boy. The girl is Natalie, and the boy is George Bean III. Then our other daughter is Leah, and she is divorced and has just recently finished a law degree from Texas Wesleyan. That both girls went to the University of Texas and got their degrees there. And so she
boyfriends down there.
followed their boyfriends down there. But Leah is divorced and has no children. And
Dogs and cats.
so that's the story with our
Your
children.
family.
Yes.
Well, that sounds like a nice family.
Well, thank
Okay.
you. Well, back
Okay,
to
I'm gonna turn it back on now.
back to my mother. As I mentioned, she was one of 4 daughters, and they had all gone to the University of Texas, but the youngest was named Virginia, and she was at the University of Texas during the reign of Ma Ferguson, the governor of Texas. And Ma Ferguson threw out the fine arts school at the University of Texas. And so Virginia needed to go on and finish her senior year. And since my family had all been members of the Christian church, Disciples of Christ, they decided that her parents, the Porters, decided that they would send her to TCU for her senior year. And she was in the music school, and was training. Her concentration was voice rather than piano. But anyway, she was in the Fat Stock Show at that time. That's what they called it. And we have a picture that I've given to Tom. In fact, I think he has at one time had the costume, or maybe the hat or something that she wore, he had in a display case in that area. But anyway, she got typhoid fever right after Christmas, her senior year, and died at TCU. And so from then on, her parents and the sisters all didn't have very good vibes as far as TCU was concerned, and Fort Worth. So anyway, when Alex and I became seriously involved with one another, it was a really difficult situation for my mother because she had all these bad feelings about Fort Worth and TCU, and Alex had graduated from TCU. And then it turns out that we lived really close to TCU.
Mary, and your name's Virginia, you go to Fort Worth.
Right. So it's interesting how life works. And I will say that Alex's father was a pharmacist as well, and his main livelihood during the Depression was to buy sick drugstores and then get them on their feet and then sell them at a profit. But in later life, he was a drug salesman, and he had called on my father, and when my father was running the drugstore.
Yeah, I think it is funny too, because history, many years ago, Virginia's ancestor,
Benjamin F. Perry.
Benjamin Perry, lived in South Carolina, and a forebear of mine lived in South Carolina, and they both served in Congress together.
Isn't that interesting?
And so then my ancestors' relatives, I don't know how it works exactly, anyway, came through Tennessee and settled in Tigertown. And then hers came through Georgia. Then her, J.W. Peeler, came here on the first train.
Right.
And so it's just not that far. And then many generations later, Virginia and I meet. So I don't know, it just seems, of course, I guess that's probably the stories in
Part of the
United
circle of
States,
life, isn't it?
in America particularly, I guess.
Really, that's interesting.
And Peeler is really a German name, and it was Bueller.
Buhler with the umlaut on the U.
Oh, okay.
And then through the years, it was changed to Peeler.
To Peeler.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That was just...
That's interesting. Can I ask you didn't work in the pharmacy. What did you do after you graduated and got out of the military?
I went in the Army.
You're in the Army.
Obviously.
Yeah.
And didn't call Virginia back, but...
For 2 years.
I mean, yeah, that's really a fast worker. Let's see. I went to work for an oil drilling contractor in Fort Worth, and
Rowan Drilling.
Rowan Drilling, and then we married, and I always like to say we went to Fort Stockton on our honeymoon, and people say, where?
Yeah, I know where it is.
And that's where Virginia taught school, and she always felt so good out there and talked to me all the time about it. And so I thought, well, the streets are paved with gold. Well, there was probably one street, and it was dusty, but anyway, that's okay. She just loved it. And actually, we went to Santa Fe, but that's what I like to tell.
Yeah.
And then I stayed with another drilling contractor in between. I worked for TCU. So that I've always been in Fort Worth.
Always been in Fort Worth. You like it over there?
I do.
It's a nice city. I like Fort Worth too.
It really is.
You got a lot going for you over there.
Oh, it's so much better than Dallas.
Well, I did teach for 2 years in Fort Stockton, and then I came back to Dallas and taught there for 2 more years. And then when we did marry, I stopped teaching. And then I've always loved coming back to Bonham. I just think it's a wonderful place to live, and I envy all of the people that have come back to Bonham and have settled here in their retirement years. I love to go back and forth by all the lake bottom and see those beautiful series of little lakes. I just think they're charming.
They were fishing today.
Yes, and they were fishing yesterday, and I just really, really envy the people that live on the lake. And we do have Alex works with a farm, a family farm, that belongs also to Brian Peeler and Marybelle Peeler Cothran. And so we come up somewhat often to check on the farm. And so it's always my pleasure to come back to Bottom, and nothing thrills me as much as to find someone that either knew my father, because there are very few people around anymore that even knew my father, because he died in 1950.
Okay.
And I was 13 when he died. But anyway, it's a wonderful heritage, and I'm very, very proud of it.
Here.
I come to the reunions, the high school reunions, every 5 years.
5 years.
So I've been doing that for quite some time. I feel like I'm almost a Bottom graduate. Been coming so often.
Yeah.
So they're lots of fun.
Yeah, they are.
And we also, Alan Wade and Jim Alexander, were nice enough to invite us to come to the class reunions that are the 48, 49, and 50 classes. And
49, 50, 50. Maybe it was 48.
48, 49, and 50. And I thoroughly enjoy getting to see those people as well, because even though most of them don't know me, I feel like I know them well, because I used to enjoy reading and going through my brother's kashatas. And so I felt like I knew all these people intimately, but none of them knew me.